I alluded to this earlier, but one of the problems with the cost of healthcare um, is the overconsumption of services. So we often go to doctors and request various tests, or we want the new wonder drugs, or um, we request things like antibiotics for viral infections, which do nothing in terms of treatment. And part of it is that we are an informed society and we have access to information. And when you have access to information, you think that you're informed on a particular topic, and more than any other time in history. I know my parents, when they go to the doctor, even now, it's, the doctor is the authority and whatever they say goes. Whereas my generation and your generation are a little bit different, where I am the generation of give me proof. So, you know, I'm well informed and I know what I'm looking for. So when I go to the doctor, I'm telling the doctor what I think it is and what I think the treatment should be. So it's a little bit different. But part of that is because we have access to so much information. And we have access, but we're also being bombarded with information. Watch TV and see how many drug commercials that you see on TV. They're providing us with this information so that when we go to the doctor, you're going to be thinking of that medication. And, well, I have allergies and I just saw this Claritin commercial, so I'm going to ask for that Claritin. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that we have this access to the information, we're requesting this, but it's leading to an overconsumption of services. And part of the other reason for an overconsumption of services is that we still don't have a really good system of electronic health records. So that doctors that you see, you're on vacation and you get sick and you go to a doctor in Arizona, are the records, the electronic records adequate so that that doctor in Arizona has access to your records to know what it is that you take, what are your other health conditions, etc. So even though electronic health records were mandated as part of the Affordable Care Act, we aren't where we need to be in terms of having a really good system of these records and being able to have access to a patient's information easily. And that can often lead to a person getting unnecessary services or medications or whatever it is, unnecessary treatment. So just a little bit about healthcare reform. So I mentioned the Affordable Care Act of 2010. It's actually the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Public Law 111-148, which has come to be known as Obamacare. So with Obamacare, a person is able to price shop and enroll in a certain plan. There are these internet sites where you can go to and shop around and look to see what plan is the most appropriate for you and your family. Do you want a higher deductible, lower cost? Do you want low deductible, higher cost? Whatever it is, you're able to shop around and pick the plan that best suits your personal situation. Some benefits to the Affordable Care Act are that it removed the pre-existing conditions. So prior to that, if you had a pre-existing condition, insurance companies could drop you. And pre-existing condition, the phrase was open to interpretation. So if you've ever had, a headache, in some cases, the insurance company would drop you from services. So it was really a challenging situation with health plans that they could drop you for virtually no reason at all, because that pre-existing condition was open to interpretation. There used to be a limit on the lifetime coverage that you could get for particular services. For example, hospital stays. So once you reached that limit, were no longer eligible to have coverage for that particular issue, whatever it was. So that was gone in the Affordable Care Act. There used to be what was called donut holes for senior citizens. That was eliminated under the Affordable Care Act. So a donut hole was that these seniors would have coverage for up to a certain amount, and then coverage would stop until they reached a certain amount. So let's say that they had coverage until their deductible of, or their out of pocket expenses of $4,000 was met. And it would vary depending on the plan. But then they had to pay out of pocket until they reached $8,000 out of pocket. So they called that gap between 4,000 and 8,000 the donut hole, and that was what seniors would fall into. So it was costing seniors a great deal of money because, as you know, as you get older, you need more medications, you need more services, etc. So they would have coverage up to a point, they would lose the coverage, and then it would pick up again. So the Affordable Care Act kind of got rid of that donut hole, and seniors had coverage. Another advantage that wasn't present prior to the beginning of this healthcare reform was preventative care. So under the Affordable Care Act, things like annual mammograms and colonoscopies were covered. So it used to be just that you got services for these medically necessary testing, whatever the testing was that they did. But under the Affordable Care Act, you were able to have certain preventative care services provided, and they would be covered. One of the major drawbacks that you hear about with regard to the Affordable Care Act is the mandate. And the mandate requires that every person have insurance. And if you don't have insurance, that you are fined, similar to the Massachusetts system. So that was one of the big things that people complained about, is that they're being forced into having this insurance and paying for insurance. So Affordable Care Act, you've heard a lot about right now with the election and having a new president, that the want to repeal the Affordable Care Act and come up with a different healthcare plan. So the proposed American Health Care Act, which is also known as Trump Care, addresses some of the things that were perceived to be negative about the Affordable Care Act, such as removing that individual mandate. Although the mandate under this Trump Care would be removed, the cost is increased. So it costs more to have the program, but you're not fined if you don't have insurance. So the problem with that is that it's likely to increase the number of uninsured, because if there's no penalty for not having insurance and the insurance costs more, why am I going to have it? So, it remains to be seen, but there's the possibility that it could lead to higher costs, but people aren't forced to have insurance. Under the American Health Care Act, there's a statement about price transparency is supposed to be reported. Very little information is available on that. So, having fee schedules and things so you know upfront how much something is going to cost. Pre-existing conditions are continue to be covered, but the insurance company is allowed to charge more if you have a pre-existing condition. So it's not a set fee. So if you have diabetes, it may cost you more for your insurance or to get services for that diabetes because of it being a pre-existing condition. They can't refuse you insurance, but they can charge you more for it. It will allow insurance companies to sell across state, so that's going to open up a little bit more of competition, and we'll see where that goes. States can elect what services are covered. So a state can say, I refuse to cover contraception, I refuse to cover mental health services, whatever it is. So again, that we have to see how that's going to play out and what challenges it might bring. And also, this plan might be more expensive for older adults, again, because of the level of services that they need. Insurance companies are allowed to charge more for older adults. So, this is still playing out. Affordable Care Act you're still able to purchase insurance under the Affordable Care Act. We'll see what happens with the American Health Care Act. Should get interesting, but it's important to pay attention and to know what's going on and listen to the rhetoric on both sides. So what I did here is, this is the report on the Commonwealth Fund, and I do want you to look over, or that's the link to the Commonwealth Fund. I do want you to look over that Commonwealth Fund because there's a lot of data and information about the U.S. healthcare system and how it compares in various metrics to healthcare systems around the world. And then there are 3 brief videos here about the U.S. healthcare system versus the world. So just take a look at these, a little bit of comparing different healthcare systems and how people have access to healthcare, et cetera. So please watch those videos and we can talk about these things in more detail next week. So when you are looking over that and in response to the Commonwealth Fund report, I want you to think about these questions. So what is your takeaway message regarding healthcare in the United States? You know, what is the big takeaway? What do you get from all of this information? I want you to think about, should healthcare be a right or a privilege? As a right, every person would have healthcare, or is it a privilege? Do you have to earn healthcare? Why does the United States spend so much on healthcare? Think about that, and are we getting what we pay for? And what are the benefits and drawbacks of universal health coverage? So think about those questions. You don't have to write out or submit any responses, but we will likely talk about these topics either when we meet face-to-face next week or in some of our discussion postings. So please look over the Commonwealth Fund report and check out those videos. They're relatively brief, and I will see you next week. Contact me if you have any questions.